I'm here with Virgin Radio ahead of this summer's Oasis reunion tour. In this series, I'm talking to people associated with the band, those that went on to influence, and even those who inspired Oasis to first step on stage. Today, I'm chatting with legendary Manchester band Inspiral Carpets. Thank you all for coming in. How are you guys getting on?
Yeah, good to be here in Virgin Radio, Virgin TV.
Your first album, Life, came out 35 years ago. Oof. How does it feel to be here so many years later?
None of us expected it when we made that record. We didn't think we'd live this long. but no, it's amazing, isn't it? Because you start a band, you don't, even with all the ambitions of, a young band like we were, none of us thought we were going to be doing it even after 10 years, really. So for an album like that to still be so popular as it is today, and some of the singles on it, This Is How It Feels is still a massive record, and it's a very popular record with the football community in the UK. It's a big football anthem, isn't it? So yeah, when we started the band, none of us thought we were going to still be well into our 60s. Did we, Graham?
No, not in the slightest.
On the early days, you had a few lineup changes before all coming together. How did you all meet, and how did you all connect in a way that you wanted to be in a band together?
Yeah, it's a weird one, really, because myself and Graham sort of knew each other from sort of girlfriends, weren't I think, really, at the time and stuff, and going to we'll go on to that later when we're off camera. Same at the same time, but yeah, and sort of we used to, sort of hang around at the sort of like the clubs in Oldham. Well, you can't call them clubs; they were dodgy indie discos, weren't they? More end, yes, yeah. So just really, real sort of affiliation of sort of like music, same sort of interest, really, football, music, things like that. We knew of Clint because Clint used to DJ in some of those places as well, and managed a few bands in the...
If you want to use the phrase local legend, you can do.
Sorry, the local legend, Clint Boone, used to DJ in some of the indie discos as well.
Clint was in his 40s at that point, wasn't he?
And managed a few bands that we knew as well, like Charlie Grid, who were a great local band at the time as well. And I think Martin, you were the 13th bass player, weren't you? Something you came along.
I was just brought in really for the sex.
Appeal. You had hair in those days.
About your band?
It was a long time ago, that, Graham. But yeah, I used to rehearse actually at The Mill, wasn't we, in Guidebridge? So in a band called The Next Step. And Clint actually recorded our demos, didn't you, Clint? Yeah. And Martin, local legend, Clint Boone.
I think Martin had some pink shoes, and he used to wear his baseball up to the side.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I had a pink bass. Yeah. Red shoes and a bright yellow sweater.
A pink bass and a pink head.
A pink.
So brought together by fashion then.
Yes. Yeah. So the Mill was legendary with the legend, local legend Clint Boone. It was legendary as well because it was sort of like the place where all the sort of like good local bands went to rehearse, and it was a place that Clint ran and had a little bit of a studio in there as well. And he used to do absolute magic. We used to have a little 4-track machine, sort of record bands and sort of like knock out brilliant demos, didn't you? Really, So yeah. It's all down to this chap, really.
Well, how did you get to your sound? How did you get to use the organ? Was it a conscious decision?
So the Inspirals were coming to me for me to record demos for them as a producer. I think we recorded at least one demo, maybe two before I joined. And I think by the time I was recording the second one, I fell in love with the sound. They didn't have keyboards at the time, but it was quite punky, and I had the psychedelic 60s organ, just because I had a bit of a collection of instruments. And I think I called Graham one night and said, how about we try me jamming with you guys? I found my diary the other day with it in, and it says, tomorrow night I'm jamming with the Inspiral Carpets.
All right.
So we tried it, and it sounded great, and that was it. I was in.
Because it was sort of post-punky sounds beforehand. I mean, you do show signs of that through your records, but...
Yeah, I think the earlier records, and certainly before we made records, we were quite rough around the edges. We heard some demos, our live tape just the other day. Someone sent us a load of live tapes from the late 80s. But it's once you play together, and we had a few members come and go kind of thing, but as your sound develops, and then you kind of get ideas about where you actually think you're going with it, sort of thing, and you get better. The more you do every day, you do something more over and over again, the better you get at it. Like, you'll become a good interviewer eventually.
No, you will. Don't laugh at
yourself. No, don't put yourself down.
And you guys are part of this amazing tapestry of Manchester bands.
Good word.
Yeah, tapestry.
And you're born out of this city. Does it seep into your music, your lyrics, your outlook?
I think it definitely did in the early days because we were writing songs that were, I mean, we all grew up in like suburbs of Manchester, like working class towns, it's fair to say. So a lot of the first songs we wrote were about that sort of world, you know, like Sackville was written about a song called Sackville Street in Manchester where we had our offices. So Joe was about an actual homeless person that we knew in Ashton-under-Lyne. So we were very much writing about our environment for the first album, definitely. And yeah, in terms of that tapestry, that scene, Madchester, we didn't realise at the time that it was going to happen like that. Because we were sort of out on a limb, weren't we? We were like this weird psychedelic band. The Smiths had finished and there was a few shoegazy type bands knocking about. But there's no real scene when we started, and then suddenly, you know, the band we became aware of the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays, and we were all doing different styles of music, as I see it. But suddenly it became Madchester. Somebody coined it Manchester, and it sped everything up, and it was a great thing to be part of, and it gave us a lot of opportunities that we probably wouldn't have got if I hadn't have jumped on that bandwagon.
I think coming from Manchester gives you a drive and an ambition, really, because we're almost deemed as outsiders, you know, from the music industry being predominantly based in London. So I think sometimes that gives you that will to prove people wrong as well, really. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to the band was just that ambition to do things our own way, really, you know, almost to the detriment of good sense and common logic. But you know, I think that desire to keep on making stuff, the way that we wanted to make stuff, and I think we still, 35, how many years down the line, we're still testament to that. Actually, that we still make the music that we want to make. You know,
I think we're very much influenced by what Tony Wilson did and the old factory thing, and before that, you know, even the Buzzcocks and you know, putting out independent records in the punk era and all that, and bringing the Sex Pistols to Manchester. So there's very much that spirit of we can do it our way, and you know, you don't have to go to London and be part of a big machine.
So other band, go on, man.
It's the idea of praxis. That's what Tony Wilson used to say. It's the idea of putting an idea into practice. And so instead of just talking about it, we actually did it.
You've got some good words, hasn't he, Martin? Nice. Yeah.
And the other bands named in this Madchester Scene, Stone Roses, Happy Mondays. So you're happy to be a part of this conversation around Madchester?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously want to be regarded as a band in your own right, and you don't. We never sit down at home and write a song and thinking, does this fit in with the Madchester template? But you know, they're both fantastic bands, and loads of other good bands as well. Charlatans, James, you know, even going back a little bit further, New Order, Joy Division, like Clint mentioned, the Buzzcocks. You know, they're all great bands. They all sound different from each other, but they are all great tunes, and we're all big fans of those bands. But you know, let's not just keep it to Manchester. Spreading out from the northwest, Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes in Liverpool. You know, it doesn't matter where you come from; it's where you're going.
Good words. It's not where you're from; it's where you're at.
Very profound. Very profound, that Graham. Very
don't
profound.
mind it.
Okay. I think on the scene, so it's interesting about scenes, isn't it? Because I think, like Graham and Clint have just said there, really, I think all the bands did sound very different in Manchester at first. But when you sort of like start to label something a scene, so you say everyone's involved in this, that's when you get the other bands coming through that are sounding like Stone Roses or Happy Mondays, and that's where it sort of like muddies it a little bit. But for me, I think our band, really, we always did our own thing and still do our own thing now. You know, you talk about the early sound, sort of very garagey, 60s influence as well, you know, and we've not followed what other people are doing. We've done what is right for us to do, really, you know, and sort of, you know, written our own songs. And like Clint said, they were about life at first, weren't they, in those little northern towns. And as you move around, you get bigger and you travel around and you meet other people, your sort of influences change, don't you? So that's what we've sort of always written about, I think, as well, really, you know.
And you were doing your own thing at the time, but did it feel like something special was sort of coalescing around Manchester, sort of?
Yeah, there was a buzz, weren't there? I mean, I remember sort of there was times sort of where, bands generally, they got together, and I think everyone sort of got on pretty well, really, and helped each other along, you know. Sort of Clint was good friends with sort of like people like Stone Roses, things like that. We all helped each other, you know. And I know of other scenes in other areas where there's quite a lot of competition, isn't there, and a lot of backbiting, but it never felt like that to me. It may have been later on when I wasn't around, but I don't know if anyone else has got anything on that.
I think generally it's a very supportive community, isn't it? Yeah. The Manchester music fraternities, it's always been very supportive. You know, you'll have casual digs at each other for a laugh in, you know, on the telly or in the NME or whatever, but Yeah, some of my best friends are in those bands that we're talking about, and and my memories of it all are always very colourful and warm. You know, the old Madchester scene, to me, it was like, I think Manchester through the 80s, I remember it just being black and white. Everything was black and white and raining, you know what I mean? Well, then suddenly, somewhere in 1988, the sun came up and it was like, it's probably to do with drugs, wasn't it? anyway, enough of that. But yeah, it was, I think to answer your question, I don't have any problems us having been part of that scene, and quite proud of it now in retrospect, you know, that we're a big part of it. You know, we didn't just jump on it, we were one of the key foundation stones for it, as I see it.
And then when you did start getting more success, describe what that was like.
Martin?
Was it a bit of a whirlwind? Got to number 2 in the
I
chart.
can't remember it really. I mean, I think at the start that when we started touring the world, it does become a whistle stop, really, doesn't it? You're constantly on the go, and that's where it was quite difficult to see how the impact of Manchester had in Manchester, because we were in Japan and America and whatnot, you know. So at that time as well, I don't think you ever think it's ever going to end, and that's really quite strange, because you almost feel quite immortal at that point, because you just traveling the world doing music and doing things that you want to do, and there's nobody to tell you no. so the fact that we're still here, that's quite amazing, really.
Well, I think with us, like we were never huge, you know. You see some bands get so big so quickly that it does become hard for them to exist and to operate. I think the level we got to, it was manageable and it was pleasant, and none of us lost the plot. I think I might have got into drinking a bit too much for a few albums, but
We only did 4.
but generally, well, and then you start buying stupid cars, don't you? I bought a stupid car, and it was proper stupid, wasn't it?
What was it?
TVR Tasman.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, we got success, but it was managed. I mean, even at Oasis, you know, that like we were closely associated with, but when they got that big, that they pretty much they had to go to London, you know, to get out of Manchester, because they wouldn't have been able to walk down the street without getting mithered, sometimes negative sort of attention maybe in the early days. But it was, I think for us, we never got to that stage where it was like stupid fame, you know what I mean?
Your song, This Is How It Feels, is used as a chant at football games. Celtic, City, United have even used it.
Yeah, they usually
Who did?
Leeds.
Yeah.
How does that feel to hear 50,000 fans on the terraces singing your song?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? It's funny. The first time I heard it, United were singing it, and then City adopted it because
got any original songs?
yeah, there's always that to take the mickey out of United. So at that point, when the two Manchester clubs had the fans had sang it, it took on a universal appeal, and then Celtic picked up on it, Leeds, as somebody said, and I think Sunderland did it for a while as well. So it feels great, doesn't it? And it's funny because Clint sort of came up with the song, and he's not really a football fan. You're not mad on football, are you? You're not bad. What? Well, what? You're not a big football fan.
I used to be. I was looking at my 1975 diary yesterday. I was 15 at the time, and every week it's got the score for Latics, Oldham.
Well, there's obviously
I went off it when punk happened, 1976. I got straight into music, and football never meant anything to me after that. So I don't support a team, but I appreciate the skills of the game. It's a beautiful game. They should call.
You could coin that as a phrase.
You could use that, couldn't you? The beautiful game. I think Charlton's amazing.
Bobby.
Nobby Styles. Willie Morgan.
What about Rashford?
Rashford's good. He's free now, isn't he?
Well, he's got to Villa, hasn't
Yeah, Villa. But I mean, that golden age of football back in the day. Yeah. Favourite player ever, Georgie Best, innit? For everything, rock and roll, innit? And yeah, personified in a football player.
Speaking of rock and roll, you got to collaborate with Marquis Smith.
Yeah.
You guys seem to be the only person that you didn't fall out with.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well,
It was a fantastic experience being with Mark, I've got to say. Yeah, we spent time in the studio, but that was about a week, didn't we, really, doing videos and doing things like this, like press with him, and that was an eye-opener, really, because he didn't hold journalists in high esteem. But it was interesting to watch. It was brilliant. It really, really was. I can see why the Fall have had so many lineup changes.
it was a one-off, wasn't it, Mark? A one-off. Yeah.
He was one of our heroes as well, because we all, there's certain bands that when we started, we all loved certain bands. The Bunnymen, Velvet Underground, and the four were one of them bands, I think it's first said, we all admired them, and I'd loved them since 1977 when I first saw them. So we got to bump into him because he had an office in the same building as us in Manchester. So through the late 80s, early 90s. And he was always very complimentary about us because we sounded like a psychedelic 60s band, which is, he was into all that. He said he sounded like the Seeds, didn't he? So we got to know him, and then at some point we were doing, which album was it? Third album?
Yeah.
Is that the third one?
No.
Fourth album. And because... oh, yeah. Yeah, I was, actually, yeah. But yeah, so we were, like, we'd got into this culture at the time of doing remixes of records. You'd put a single out, and then the week after you'd release a remix of it. And as an alternative, it came up with the idea of doing some collaborations with some of our favourite artists, mainly to use as B-sides and alternative versions. So we did one track with Peter Hook out of New Order. We did something with Basil Clark out of a band called Yargo that we loved. Did 2 tracks with him. And Mark, we decided we wanted to get Mark Smith to do a track or 2. So we got the number for an hotel he was in at the time. I think I phoned him up in an hotel. Is that right? Somehow he was in an hotel when I phoned him. Or maybe I was in a hotel. Either way, I was drinking. But anyway, but yeah, he jumped at the opportunity to do it because he liked our band. And I think, like you say, he didn't fall out with us. We did fall out a couple of times when we were working with him. One time at Top of the Pops, me and him had a bit of a, what do we call it?
Altercation, was it?
Yeah. It was a bit handbags, but it was physical, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it was fine after that. We did one of the best bits of telly ever, didn't we? We ended up slapping each other on the stairs going down to the studio to do the performance. I won't go into details of what was going on, but it was, bizarre moment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because at that point, like, some of my biggest idols were Elvis Presley, Philip Glass, his composer, and Mark Smith, and they're around slapping one of them in a stairwell in London. Weird. Anyway, but yeah, we like that was one of our greatest achievements, getting him on Top of the Pops. It was phenomenal, wasn't it?
Yeah. It nearly didn't happen.
Nearly didn't happen, yeah. Yeah, that's another story, isn't it?
Anyway, carry on, Bonnie. How's your right?
Who wants to say something next?
Martin,
got all of that.
I don't know. This is like Jeopardy now.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you had
Pass.
you had success, but you split up just as Britpop was bursting.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like that was the right time to split and go your separate ways?
I don't think we really split up.
We took a break. We decided to take a break.
Yeah.
It was very. Should I take?
Yeah, go on.
It was very amicable. We had no manager. I think we'd spent a year without management. We were trying to find management and couldn't find anything. So we were self-managing ourselves. And we were also looking for a record deal because we had no record deal, did we, at that point?
No.
We like Mute Records had severed our relationship or whatever. So we couldn't find a record label, we couldn't find a manager, and we just thought grunge is the big thing at the moment, which it was. Madchester was looking like it was fizzling out a bit. So we said maybe this isn't the right time for us to be banging on doors, so we just took a break. And I think in hindsight, it's the best thing we could have done. You know, rather than struggling and floundering, we all went off and did other proper jobs. And then when we came back in 2003, it was like, nice to be back, wasn't it? Came back with a vengeance. So yeah, but yeah, it was an amicable split at the time. But I think it was necessary that we got out of there and revisited later, you know.
Yeah, but then Britpop blooming in that way, do you not feel like you could have ridden the wave, or it could have taken you on to further heights?
That's a really good question, that, and I have thought about that because we did pull the plug on in the spring of '95, and it really was breaking. You know, like Pulp, we're playing arenas, obviously Oasis, you know, but. Like Clint said, it felt like grunge was the real big thing, and what chance of a band from Manchester? You know, Stone Roses had kind of disappeared, Happy Mondays had kind of gone, like the wheels had fell off Happy Mondays, and then Oasis came along and absolutely cleaned up. So it's quite interesting that, you know, you had the likes of the Blue Tones, and even a little bit later bands like Franz Ferdinand and Maximo Park. They were fans of us, of our band, not even particularly necessarily the Stone Roses or Happy Mondays, you know, but like a lot kind of like a bit more sort of punkier sounding bands, and we possibly could have been in there on some kind of a resurgence, but it just wasn't to be, and we stand by all the decisions we made, really. You know, we had run out of energy. The tank was on empty, you know. And yeah, then we sat back and then just saw Oasis break massively, and that's fine. You know, that's what music's all about. We, in our own little way, I'm sure we paved our way a little bit, like Joy Division and Buzzcocks and New Order done for our era. The Stone Roses, Happy Mondays and ourselves paved the way for other Manchester bands. And then don't forget bands like James and the Charlatans came from the same era and carried on and have had success even to this day, you know. Never stopped, you know.
Virgin Radio.